movers, first movers again, I've got FSA there. This is research. This was going to be the paper that I was assigning you, but I didn't in the end, the Balding and Kristen one, because of, it's a long story. But what they did is that they looked at 365 businesses in consumer goods and 861 in industrial markets. So they had the same idea that maybe the type of market, how important first mover advantages are, might vary by the type of market. Maybe in consumer goods they're more important than industrial goods. That's the type of space they were in. Looking at data from 1930, yes, I checked that is not a typo, 1930 to 1985. There's a database called the PIMS database that comes out of Boston Consulting that has data, performance data of large companies over really, really long time scales. And what this paper basically boiled down to, bottom line result, pioneers were substantially less profitable than followers over the long run, controlling for all of the factors that could account for it. So their take on first mover advantage is, yes, you can get a short run advantage, but over the long run, those early movers have got to pay for the R&D. They've got to pay for the mistakes with the customers. They've got to pay to build a reputation. They've got to pay to sell the product. And costs are higher. So you can get higher sales, but you also get higher costs. And so if we look at the most comprehensive data set we've got available, it says that yes, first mover advantages are important in early stages, in the short run, higher revenue, but also higher costs. And in the longer run, pioneers are no more likely to have better performance. And what they argue for is we need to move from can we be first, this kind of, we've got a new product, can we be first, into how exactly will being first make a difference. So this is the kind of line of thinking that I've been pushing you into in this class. There's a tendency, actually, the session that we've had on first mover advantage is more balanced than you normally get in terms of first mover advantages. Normally, we assume that there is a first mover advantage and we move on from there. The question is why, and I came across a really very interesting paper on why do we believe in first mover advantage. And this is a paper by a marketing professor using consumer psychology saying, look, why is it that we talk about first mover advantage when the academic evidence is not so clean? The academic evidence says at best it depends, and possibly says that there are first mover advantages in the short run, but not in the long run. And what this person, Lisa Bolton, argues is the idea of first mover advantage in the social marketplace of ideas. You know, I'm chatting with you here, there's textbooks, there's business press, there's consultancies, thinking of that as a social marketplace of ideas. It's rooted in cultural beliefs and personal experience that favour firstness. And she did a load of interesting experiments with consumers based on consumer psychology, thinking about or trying to understand when people think first mover advantages are better, or when it's best to go first. So belief in first mover advantages dominates the mainstream media despite mixed academic evidence. So the paper starts off by showing, over a given time period, the number of mentions of first mover advantages in the popular press, websites, in like Business Week and that sort of publication, mentioned a lot in those sorts of outlets, but not actually mentioned that much in academic outlets. We don't spend much time as academics worrying about this. But it's really important in the popular press because it's really important as an idea, as a cultural idea. So belief in first mover advantages dominate mainstream media. So when she looks at mainstream media, she sees that actually, almost universally, Business Week says first mover is best. Even though we know analytically that first mover is not necessarily best, and you might be better off being Apple. Oh, actually, I didn't point that out. What this means for Apple? Wait. Yeah? Exposure to the business press leads to a higher belief in first mover advantage. So she did experiments with people who had been read, who are recognized to have read a lot of business press, people who are regular readers of newspapers and business press. They tend to believe in first mover advantages more than people who haven't. Belief in FMA higher in American culture than in her case China, I would actually say than in almost any other country in the world. That there's something culturally, particularly in the States, about being first that's really very, very important. And because we have so much of the mainstream business press and so much of the academic literature is dominated by what comes out of the States, It's got this real kind of gravitas to it, this idea, even though the evidence is not actually that strong. Belief in first mover advantages is higher after priming on first mover exemplars. If I had started this class with Zipcar and then said, so, in a new industry, would you go first? You would say, oh yeah. Yeah? So she did a similar sort of experiment, gave people examples of first mover advantages, and not surprisingly, people believed in first mover advantages. It was higher after priming on FMA examples. But interestingly, this belief was persistent despite counterexamples. So if I had started this lecture with Zipcar and it said, so first mover advantages, you go, oh yes, got to be first mover. It's then hard for me to shake that belief, even if I show you mobile payment systems, because you say, oh well, that's an exception, it's high tech. Yeah? So there's a reason why I did it the other way around, because I'm playing with your minds. But a lot of people research this stuff. Why is it that we believe in some of these ideas? And first mover advantage is a very, very powerful idea in the popular business press. It's not talked about negatively, particularly in the business press. And somehow, if Apple comes along and ends up dominating this space, it's considered to be some kind of, surprise or genius move by Apple. But if we actually look at the fundamentals, the current players in mobile payments won't necessarily be the leading players and ones that make most money out of it in a few years' time. Okay, conclusion. So what we did is we linked last week's material with this week's material. Last week it was more about increasing returns to adoption and standards wars and that type of thing, how you get to be the dominant design in a particular industry. Given that there are increasing returns to adoption, that opens up the question of when it's best to go. Is it best to go early? Is it best to go late? The answer we had is that academic evidence is mixed, but environmental context does seem important. If you think of the ideas that we had in our conversation, or the lists that we had from Schilling, just listing the advantages and disadvantages, actually a lot of them can be subsumed under the bigger framework that was in the Academy Management Review paper there, looking at the pace of technology development and the pace of market development. So in particular, these S-curves are important, what type of context we're in. So next time, we're going to compress 2 sessions together. I tried to think of a sensible way to do reading for that. And so what you've got is you've got 2 chapters. But you know the chapters in this book are not too long anyway. It's not horrendous. So chapters 8 to 9. Chesbrough is a paper on open innovation. So this is about openness or closeness. And Tetra Pak is a case about collaboration. So that's how I've kind of mashed it together. I put it all on Blackboard, and we'll deal with those 2 topics together next week. If you're starting to fret about the exam, don't fret. I will make sure that you know what it looks like. Possibly next week, but more likely the week after this. More likely I'll just do it in the last session. Because next week we've got